I get it. So, well, yeah. I mean, you're really doing for people who have trouble. I mean, getting access to things they love to paint. It's best to have heart to heart with them and say, listen, what's important to you in life? What are your values? What are your convictions? What really moves you? And try and use that. Find out how you can express that without resorting to a photograph that you can't relate to.
I could, one thing I might add to that, and when you brought the question up initially, what came to my mind was when many years ago I first started painting Indian dancers. And the only reason I turned to that subject matter was, number one, it was available, but primarily it was a complex subject matter that was presented a lot of problems to solve. So I had color to handle, costuming or outfits on the dancers that were extremely complex, so the information needed to be simplified, but one couldn't simplify it too much or you would lose a sense of what was actually happening in the scene. And the other thing was then to be able to portray movement. And at some of those celebrations, one's allowed to photograph the dancers as they're dancing, but not obviously when they're just standing. Okay, so you could do the dance, but nothing else. But then in photographing the dance, one had to be able to capture the sense of the dance. So then it was problem solving. And the photographs were merely a tool to explore the subject matter and to try and figure out how to simplify, but not too much, complex imagery with sometimes color harmony that was a little lacking, and then also to create a painting that was always moving. So it was a problem-solving exercise. Had the paintings turned out just like the photo, I would have been the first one to throw them away. I had to, as an artist, bring something extra to the table.
Okay. Who wants to talk about the technology, say in the form of videos, DVDs and things, as educational tools for artists?
They're good. Can I say something about technology that I'm actually exploring?
Yes.
I'm looking at Photoshop a little bit, and I'm sure other people here are too, where I take some, like right now I'm working on this major piece where I've drawn 10 or 11 figures and I put them in to the scene using a photograph and I put them into the scene, into my painting, and then I'm rearranging and exploring it in that. And I find that to be an interesting technology that I've just started to explore in the last year. I can't actually hit all those models, or actually it's just one guy, but I can't get him to do all those different things all at the same time. And so I'm like, oh, and so, yeah, it's like a sketchbook, and I look back at some of my other work when I am putting like sort of representational material into sort of surrealist kind of ideas or canvases. I would have like 30, 40, 50 sketches, like where I'm doing all the small sketches. And this is actually saving me a lot of time. And I think it's kind of interesting. I'm still using my material from life and then re-engineering it with the computer, but then I have to actually find a way to put it back onto the canvas. And so that's a whole other thing I'm still in the process of learning. But I think that's an interesting sort of exploration. And I know that that's what's kind of going on a lot in the contemporary world, the contemporary art world. You can see Photoshop images. I mean, Chuck and I like to look at not just the type of work where it's more traditional, like what we do, but Chuck's my husband. What we like to look at is, contemporary work, and we say, oh, Photoshop, Photoshop, Photoshop. You can just sort of see how Photoshop is inspiring or influencing all this sort of stuff. So,
how many people out there who don't know what Photoshop is? Anybody? No. Okay, so they all know what Photoshop is.
There were two.
So how many people have put their images into Photoshop and played with them?
Yeah. So Photoshop as a compositional tool used the way the old masters would take sketches, things, and try this and try that and manipulate things. It's a faster perhaps more vivid way to do the same thing as a modern tool. It's extremely useful. Wouldn't you say so, Scott?
Yes, I would say so. I do have to say that I'm kind of lazy. I actually don't really use, I have done that a couple times when we were playing with it, and I do know Photoshop pretty well, as Richard's an expert in Photoshop. But I am pretty lazy. I do tend to just do, when I'm doing my compositions to figure out things, I tend to just find it quicker and easier to just do sketches. And usually I do it in charcoal so that I can erase it really easily. Because a lot of times I do work from multiple photographs, 5 or 6, because I'm doing people in movement or dancing, and one person's good in this one person's. While I could spend a lot of time sitting and trying to, I don't know, I just find it easier to do it with my sketchbook, but you know, everybody's different, and you know.
Yeah, another way, and I know Dan has some probably things that you know Photoshop too, don't you? Yeah. I'd love to hear what you have to say about it, because what I find, even if you don't know Photoshop or you know it just a little bit, what is a lot of fun to do is to take your painting. I'm not talking about the original subject, but take your painting and shoot it at stages, and stick it in the computer, put it up on a monitor. And almost every program has some little Photoshop type stuff you can do, like you can reverse the image, turn it upside down, lighten it, darken it, make it redder, bluer, or something. But it tends to affect the whole image, whereas Photoshop, you can be very selective and just do individual things. But if you could take your image halfway through the painting, or you've been sitting there for hours working on it or whatever, and then stick it into Photoshop and look at it backwards, you'd be amazed at what you discover about what you've been doing the past couple of hours.
Yes.
You know, it's more vivid than looking at it in a mirror. So.
That's exactly what I've been exploring, is taking a photograph of my work from life.
The computer as a tool is a modern marvel. It's so wonderful. The big danger is to use it as a substitute for skill. That is the big danger, because if you do, you're only fooling yourself. And you may fool, you know, your relatives who look at it and say, well, it's just like a photograph, you know, and they're really impressed, you know. And I have said to people from time to time who when art comes up, and I say, well, you know, I would say half of the paintings you see in many of the art magazines or in the advertisement, and much of the art that you see, huge percentage of it is simply art that has been photographed, the subject has been photographed and then projected and traced and even painted while the projector is still on. Well, they can't believe it, you know, because they think an artist is somebody that's born with the ability to draw a horse or a cow or a house or whatever. But it's true. The reliance upon it, because of its sheer convenience, or as an easy bypass of skill, is almost irresistible for those of you who have a weak willpower. And of course, nobody in this room is like that. But as I said I don't know if I said it in Al Prima or what, it's a little akin, when you do that, you know, as you use it as a substitute for skill, it's a little bit like going out and getting a Stouffer's frozen dinner, you know, and you stick it in the microwave and you think you're a chef. Am I right? Okay. Do we have any more comments? Or are you afraid of it?
I can't. Am I allowed?
Go ahead. I'm kidding.
I do have a couple of things. Certainly, I agree with the using Photoshop as a compositional tool. Often, what I'll do is and this is primarily how I use photography in my work, is that I will photograph the subject and even draw back from it a little bit. Don't crop it exactly as I think I'm going to paint it, but photograph it, draw back from it, and then using the cropping tool, in a matter of 3 minutes, you can come up with, you know, 30 different, really interesting, different compositions. Then you shrink those all down really small on the screen, and you can then really quickly and easily see which composition has the most graphic punch. You know, so that's really what's critical, is how can I find an abstract design that is riveting, and that's where I use it the most in that. Getting back to what Sherry said before about commercialism, no, it's funny because I find it's quicker to paint from life than it is to paint from photograph. So if I'm going for commercial success, I'm better off working from life because it's faster than when I sit from a photograph. You're scratching your head and I'm hungry, whatever happens. But when there's a model for me, there's an urgency that just makes me work.
Or the power goes out.
Those are the things that I.
That model in front of you changes your decision making, and that's where it's faster. Don't you think? I mean, I always find that working from life is an edit.
Yeah, it's a whole different process. Again, it's when I work from a photograph, it is, as Jeremy said, it's memory work. It's what did that look like? And you put a tone down and it's like, well, that doesn't work with that tone against this tone. I have to try that again, rather than being right there and intuitively just laying it down, and it's just quicker.
Yeah, I agree with that totally. In fact, because I've always found that if I do something from life, it almost always takes me exactly, usually, sometimes even more, but it usually takes twice as long to do the same painting from life because of that fact. When it's in life, when it's from life, I can see it and I get it. I can just kind of almost copy what's from life. And the values are all there, the colors. Whereas, like you said, you have to experiment. And that's why if the subjects that I love the most, I could do exclusively from life, right? Say portraits or still lifes or smaller landscapes or something, like you said, not the last light, then that's what I would do because they are quicker. Really, I tend to just do paintings, like the large one that some of you saw in the slide presentation I gave this afternoon, like 25 figures that were life-size from India. That's just not something I could ever do from life, and I want to do it. It's my favorite kind of a subject and scene, but it would be faster if I had those people. It's just the experimenting you have to go through that you don't have to go through in life.
Okay, can we go on to another question that I have here? I shouldn't ask them. I'm in charge here.